industry coming together to decide on what are those best practices for installations. Of course, these standards can often be adopted into law and where they can bear the weight of enforcement. And it's different, as you can see in each one of these different buckets, we've found that there's different stakeholders involved in each of these areas. Usually on the installation side, it falls under the National Building Councils, Department of Constructions, Housing, National Standards Body. And then it comes down to the second bucket there of who performs the work. Again, it's a conversation between government and industry deciding what is the technical knowledge required now that they have an idea of what systems that they want. These specifications become the basis for personnel certification criteria. To be a plumber, you must know X, Y, and Z. To be a sanitary engineer, you must know A, B, and C. And then in turn, once that criteria is set, that becomes the foundation for curriculum, personnel credentialing, and it involves partners from the Ministry of Manpower, Labor, academic and vocational institutions. And some of my colleagues who will be presenting this seminar with me are great examples from Jordan. The third bucket that we look at is what products are used and how would we protect the marketplace from unsafe and inferior products. And this is where, again, it's a conversation between the standards become the dialogue between government and industry on the technical specifications of those products and determining the level of performance that is required. There's also trade implications. And by adopting standards, it gives and they become part of your national plan and allows the market and manufacturers to respond to. Of course, this involves different players as well, from the Department of Commerce and Trade and Customs and National Standards Body. And so you can see, as you look down through that bottom row, the different government industries and then also the private sector that are required, standards become that language, that tool between them to decide all these important issues. The topics covered in this slide, I think, were covered adequately in the previous one. So let's go ahead and skip to the next. So in my line of work, I focus on 5 countries currently. The United States, Jordan, Indonesia, India, and Philippines. As you can see, those are diverse countries located in different regions of the world. But what's interesting is that we find that there's the same systemic challenges that are occurring in each of these countries. From an industry perspective, we do see a shortage of skilled labor. And partly that stems from inadequate training opportunities, the constant struggle of trained labor versus the use of trained labor. And we've also seen that plumbing industry issues have paralleled the development challenges that these countries face. Of course, labor issues don't happen just in a vacuum. They tie into other market issues. And so there must be systems in place to support workforce development and growth. Some of the things that have hindered this are inconsistent practices and materials in any given country, unreliable supply chains, spare parts, inferior products, for example. There is lack of regulation and enforcement, and we have found that government and ministry is not playing an adequate role. And for the next couple of slides, I'd like to talk just a couple things about what various other countries have done and the work that's being done here in Jordan. So as we begin talking about water demand management, I like to use this image. This comes from a New York Times journalist who did a series of articles on the state of California and the historic drought that they've been facing for the last 4 or 5 years. And it really helps to illustrate why water demand management is so critical. As you
One of those steps that has been taken by the United States is to create a WaterSense program. What this program does is it helps consumers to identify which products are water efficient, and which are not. It's a voluntary partnership and a labeling program between the U.S. government and manufacturers that was created back in 2006, and with the focus on reducing municipal water use across the country. Now, as a consumer, what it means is if you go into a store and you're able to see a product that has this WaterSense mark on its packaging, you know you're buying a product that uses 20% less water and also performs well. Part of the emphasis in the industry has been to create this mark and build it with integrity, so that consumers truly learn to trust it. We've been able to accomplish this by requiring that third-party organizations certify the products, not only for the efficiency, performance too. A consumer, me going into the store, I don't have to take just the manufacturer's word on it. I know a third-party organization has tested and verified it. And there's been tremendous savings. 346 billion gallons of water have been projected to have been saved by WaterSense in 2014 alone. And that's 1.16 trillion gallons since 2006. Not only is it saving water, it's reducing energy consumptions and saving consumers money. But we still have an adoption issue. Only 5.5% of California's 33.5 million installed toilets meet the WaterSense standard, which is currently set at about 4.28 liters per flush. And only 21.1% of bathroom faucets and 23.9% of shower heads. So you can see, even in the United States, we still have a long way to go. The next country where IAPMO has been doing a lot of work is in India. India faces some tremendous challenges when it comes to particularly sanitation services. 88% of the 1.2 billion population has access to drinking water from improved sources, as compared to 68% in 1990, so tremendous gains have been made there. However, only 25% of the total population of India has drinking water on their premise, and 67% of Indian households do not treat their drinking water, even though it could be chemically or bacterially contaminated. On the sanitation side, India is home to 594 million people who practice open defecation, which is over 50% of the population. Only 31% of India's population use improved sanitation, and 211 million people have gained access to improved sanitation between 1990 and 2008. So while there have been some great inroads made on the sanitation side, there's still some tremendous work that's still left to be done. One thing that our work in India has taught us is that the private sector or the public sector cannot do it alone. It really takes a collaboration between industry and the government in order to make a true difference. IAPMO was initially approached by the Indian Plumbing Association, who was very interested in creating nationalized installation practices and interested in being able to train personnel to those practices. And you can see examples of some of the training that has taken place over the years. Because of limited participation from the national government, we've had to partner with the local provincial governments in beginning to enforce and to help mandate some of this work. And it's been a much tougher road than in other countries where the national government has been an active participant with the industry. I tossed this slide in to highlight the fact that standards are an important tool, whether we're discussing rural or urban settings, as well as in developing countries as much as in developed countries. This is looking at a 2015 study at hand pump standards in Africa. And it looked at the methods by which hand pump standards were implemented in each country. And it found that Guinea who was the first to formally standardize hand pumps in Africa back in 1982, today boasts the highest functionality rate on the continent at 90%. And this is important because pumps provide water access for 65% of the population. Some of the things that they found is that, of course, in the policy, it's mandatory for organizations working within Guinea to follow. And it's received tremendous government support. And because of the government's active involvement, those who are implementing are very compliant with it as well. Pumps benefit from after-sales support because there is a plan and manufacturers in the industry can respond to that. They know what's being used there and how to go in and fix them. They can create processes to support that system. And what's interesting, one of the key findings from the study was that the practitioners believe that the strict policy in conjunction with the appropriate technology selections has really been the recipe for success. Another key finding that I found was that institutional champions, having the government support, having private sector support, really becomes it becomes critical to the success of the project. Indonesia is a great example of a public-private partnership that's been successful. We were approached by the Indonesian government a few years ago with concerns that they were facing in protecting their public health of their citizens, as well as the need that they had to develop sustainable water and sanitation systems. On the water conservation side, one of the challenges that they were facing was that because there were so many private wells and groundwater was being overtapped, they're starting to experience saltwater intrusion into their groundwater, which of course it gets to a point where that's irreversible. And so some of the steps that the Indonesian government realized that they needed to take was to create standards to protect these systems, and then also looking at the product and testing certification, the personnel training and certification, the enforcement of these systems, and then reaching out to the public on the importance of these processes and help them to become stakeholders in this system. They worked through a couple different steps. Step one was actually the development of a new SNI, or for them that's their national standard for plumbing. They went through an open consensus process that actually involves stakeholders from the government, from industry. They went through public comment periods, and in the end, what was published was the first plumbing standard or code for the country of Indonesia, and it was published on March 2015.
This slide illustrates that standards have been used by every step of the process by the Indonesian officials. First, that the installation practices were developed specific to the needs of Indonesia through an open consensus process. The appropriate ministries and regional authorities were able to implement and adopt the standards through technical regulations. From there, personnel certification programs were able to be created to train those who design, install, maintain, and enforce these systems. Finally, products that were targeted to be used in these systems are able to be independently tested and certified that they do meet the standards that Indonesia has set up.
We can't talk about water demand management in Jordan without bringing up the USAID project. We can't talk about water demand management in Jordan without bringing up the USAID project IDARA. This was a 5-year program that ran from March 2007 to March 2012. It had a number of different accomplishments, but one of those areas dealt with creating a stakeholder-driven water demand management program. Now, underneath that, they recognized the importance of many of the issues that we have talked about today. They developed some of the great benefits that came from that was that they developed a new national plumbing code. They began to implement a plumbing materials certification program where there's still more work to be done. They established a master plumber's vocational training program, a work plan to implement a labeling program, and identified water demand management enforcement mechanisms. And so you can see the number of those dealt with those 3 core buckets of the how, the who, and the what that we talked about earlier. Of course, now, as we approach this 5 years later, we realize that in many of those areas there were limited successes, and there's still much more work to be done. And so how do we take water demand management to the next level? And for this, I'm pleased to announce a new partnership that has been been the result of an ongoing dialogue between the Jordan Standards and Metrology Organization, the Ministry of Public Works and Housing, the Royal Scientific Society, and the Water Authority of Jordan, and IAPMO. And really the focus of this partnership has been to look at what has been done 5 years later and to see what barriers still remain that need to be overcome. And a few areas that we've decided to focus on moving forward. One is, while there has been a plumbing code that's been in place, we recognize that a couple areas, a couple challenges with that. One, plumbing product standards were actually never adopted into technical regulations, which means there's no mechanism for Jordan to enforce plumbing products entering into their markets to ensure their safety and also to ensure their reliability. So we're looking to address that as number one in this part of this new partnership. Two, we've also recognized that there's no local enforcement process for approving the occupancy of buildings. This means that in the Amman Municipal Authority, a building can be submitted for approval. The design plans can be submitted. The officials will review it. They'll make sure that it does meet what's called out for in the codes. But then as we go through the construction process, there's no plumbing inspector or other official that will go in to verify that the plumbing systems, both the materials that are being used and the processes are up to the Jordanian code, which is where inefficient products are being introduced, and we realize that this is a challenge that needs to be overcome. And so we're looking to help them develop a new process whereby these systems can be checked. Next, if the funding allows, we would like to update the Unified Code to provide buildings with water and sanitation, which is the official name of the Jordanian National Plumbing Code. We'd like to provide an update to that. In many parts of the world, these codes are updated every 3 years, and it's part of ensuring that it is a living document that adapts new technology and innovations that are occurring. And then third, we'd love to discuss with our friends from CAQA about potentially updating and developing new personnel certification requirements. We are very excited about what this new partnership can accomplish and how it can help to realize meaningful water savings in Jordan. If you're interested in learning more or becoming involved with this partnership, feel free to contact me. We'd love to be in touch with you on it. This is my...
ضايل تقريبا سلايد واحدة مع الوقت مشى، بس خلينا نحضر آخر واحدة وبعدين نروح نحكي. هي آخر سلايد ضايل هي.
It's been a great pleasure. It's been a great pleasure to be able to present to you today. My contact information is on this slide. Please don't hesitate to reach out with any questions you might have. I'd love to be able to be of service to you and be able to continue the dialogue. And I apologize that I won't be there. I'm not there with you today, but I look forward to being back in Jordan very soon, and we'll hope to see you on my next visit. Thank you very much.
شكرا لكم جميعا واطلنا عليكم واحنا للامانه يعني تعدينا الوقت. في حدا عنده سؤال بحب يسال الاخوان المحاضرين؟ طيب شكرا جزيلا الله يعطيكم العافيه وكل عام وانتم بخير. الان رح نروح على الكلوزنج سيشن ونودعكم ونقول لكم الى اللقاء في الاسبوع العربي الخامس ان شاء الله.